And, being as an old press guy, now being on the other side and going, holy shit, like...
You realize what an asshole you were?
Oh, yeah. No, totally. We're really good at that shit. Well, my specialty was not being an asshole, it was the poker face. So I was the poker...
You still have that?
Yeah, I do.
It's the walking out of a demo going...
Or as some people call it, resting bitch face. But yeah, it's like the flip side because you go around and on the press side and you
Karma,
see
man.
I deserve it. But you go
I hate
like
you guys. The poker face. You're like, shit, he hates it, man. He hates it. We've been killing ourselves.
It shows a lot of promise.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. My thing was it looks promising.
Yes,
that was my. Oh yeah, it looks promising.
Because that implies like if you do enough work to this, it'll get there. But I know this is your submission build. So
now,
next time you send me a scene or whatever, I'm gonna be like, it looks promising.
But I used to get pissed when the developers would ask, "What do you think?" right away.
Right.
I felt too on the spot. I don't want to tell you what I think yet. Let me think about it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is the developers live with it for a long time, and I've literally just been introduced to it and seen 5 to 10 minutes of it.
Right.
And I'm the kind of I know some people are just like, but I'm the kind of guy who likes to process it a little bit.
Sure.
Right.
So and think about it. So yes, it looks promising.
Well, and it's also
the other
sort
one
of an
could be good.
Yeah. Well, it's an impossible question, too, because you don't want to say, it looks like shit, right? Like, you can't, even if you think that, you can't say that. So it's just a rough question. I get why you would ask that question.
I've definitely gotten, and I think it's something that's changed, as I think that our end of things has become a little unglued and, it's a little weird out here on this end of things with just the way the traditional press is going, right. And kind of it feels like the kind of YouTube, Twitch stuff is rising up to crush the websites the same way the websites rose up to try to crush print.
Right.
What do you mean tried to?
Okay, fine. Crush print. Yeah. They're out in Minnesota still doing something.
There's still a magazine.
They're still and so we're kind of straddling this weird line between those two things in a lot of ways with, as much video stuff as we do now. And it's become less about here's what the publication thinks about this. And it's become a lot more about here's what I think about it. And it's given me a lot more leeway in situations like that to say things like, this game is 100% not for me. I think that there are interesting things you're doing, but, I wish you the best of luck, but you're still working on this turn-based strategy game that or you're working on a game that is very much like Dark Souls, which I just can't really connect with, and that's been weirdly liberating to be able to kind of say that sort of stuff, because the fear on the press end, at least with the way it went with me, was you would get asked that question a lot by PR coming out of a demo, and especially EA was really good at it for a really long time of showing you the games and then just having some publicist kind of standing next to you and go, so what'd you think of this? What'd you think of this? And literally writing all that down and storing it away somewhere. And at some point it was I'm not a consultant. I'm not here to do that. It's not, I'm here to kind of report on stuff and I don't want kind of my flip off the cuff thing than weighing in that heavily on a game that I've seen for 9 minutes or
Those notes went to a dev team that's what the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly. They go all these press guys are assholes. They don't get it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a situation that I hate being put in. Even when I like a game, it leads to me going and then walking out of the room and going that looks fucking great to whoever I saw the demo with or something like that. And so a little bit of that has changed to where I feel a little more comfortable saying that, because it's less about representing a publication and trying to be all things to all people the way that the big websites were, and being a little more focused on us as people. Which
is interesting though the way it's changed, because I feel like the question of did you like it from a developer standpoint, at least 10 years ago came from we're working in isolation,
right?
And nobody else is seeing the game, and we know that at least journalists are gamers, right? And that they'll be able to provide some kind of salient input that maybe a PR guy or somebody else from the organization doesn't have that same viewpoint, right?
Right.
And now I think it's maybe a little bit different because we do, as the industry's matured, now we do get a lot of user tests and we get a lot of that feedback earlier. But I can remember, I mean, again, 10 years ago, just being desperate for any kind of not even like positive validation, but just like just tell me what you think because we've been working
on the right track?
And we don't know. Like you lose sight of like, is it even good anymore because you're in the weeds on it?
Do you worry these days that because there's so much feedback about unreleased games coming in at all times, do you worry, at some point does it feel like you're just focus testing everything to death? Even if you're not running a focus test, like if you're looking at all that feedback on what you're working on, do you worry that it can poison the process?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on when you do it, right? Like I think, I'm not a big fan of doing, focus tests early in the process, like, this concept, right? Does this concept resonate? Because nobody knows. Or like, does this feature set resonate? And like, people don't. I mean, you don't know what features you want sometimes and you can't articulate it necessarily as a consumer what features you think are missing until they're there, right? Like, or whether or not a feature is going to work when you're looking at like a one sheet. So, I think that part of the process, I'm not really supportive of, but later in the process, like, I mean, even where we're at right now, right? Yeah. Like, as we're in kind of the final stages, obviously, to release in October, but so we're looking at, how many bugs can we fix and trying to get as many, meaningful bugs done, but we're also still doing user testing to tune and stuff, and that's like absolutely invaluable, and I don't think it poisons the process at that point because we already kind of know what we are and we know what the strengths and weaknesses of the game are, and now it's just about, okay, how do we capitalize on the things that we know are really strong, and how do we, improve upon the things that, like, on the tuning side or whatever that we know need that help. But we need that feedback because we're so close to it. We can't be objective, right? So we need those. We need people to come in and sit down and play the game. So I really value it from that standpoint. But it's all about the timing of when you do it and how wide you go and who gets that information, and you don't want to send the team into a tailspin if something comes back negative, right? Or the converse, right? You don't want, if something comes back really positive, you want to be like, oh, okay, well, our job's done, right? It's like, well, no, we still probably still stuff we can work on,
or you get people that are just taking that data and just using it to like try to win arguments about a game. I imagine, that's probably where you come in a lot, where like a team will have an argument and you step in and go like, no, it's console MOBA. Make a console MOBA.
Yeah, that is.
You just come in and say that every time, right?
We actually won't know what the conflict is. In fact, we may not even know there is a conflict. We'll maybe figure it out while we're there. Yeah. The publisher will bring us in, and they'll, they don't tip their hands at all, which is good. They'll say, "Come and look at this game," and then when we're playing it, we'll play it for a few days. And it's usually on that last day, then someone on the marketing, whatever, will call us in and say, "So what do you think?" And then it becomes clear, like, okay, they were trying to get something specific out of us.
Right.
And often it will turn out that maybe we actually do agree with them, right? And so they will use that to sort of buffer the argument. But other times it's the other, goes the other way, and we think the developers were right. So sometimes we are settling conflicts without realizing that that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And how often do you ever get into just like recommending features of like, this would, because I hear that a lot, that that there are people like, oh, if this only had this one feature, because this is very now and very with it, like this, it has to have PvP, it has to have this.
How many grappling hooks have you suggested recently?
Right, because we're seeing a lot of them out there, and it's awesome. Like, I'm with you. If you want my consultant's opinion, PayPal me $9, and I will write back, put a grappling hook in your game.
We just have a bullet we put in every report.
But has there been, obviously, like, trends happen in this business? And,
sure. Like one trend that has come up a lot, over the last 2 years that I've been there is when they ask us about PR and marketing is, they ask us a lot more about Twitch and YouTube than they did before. And a lot of our recommendations are around that, as opposed to where it would have been about the press.
Right.
How do we reach the YouTube guys? How do we get Twitch to stream it?
You pay them. Like, it's literally, they have just give them $10,000 and they do the $20,000 for some of them, and that's the answer.
That's
Again,
the answer.
PayPal me $9 for this consultant's fee. Now, Lorne, you seem like the sort of guy that would want to go against almost all of that.
But no, I'm the kind of guy that wants to learn more about that, and be smarter and less pained along the way. But I think it all kind of goes to all the points being made. But at the same time, if there's an inherent vision of something original, you're not going to get a focus test that says this is what we want.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
They don't know
Yeah,
yet.
100%.
And I think what happens is it's the same thing in Hollywood. The bigger the budget, and then now you basically, it's real simple, right? The bigger the budget, you got public companies involved, you got shareholder concerns, you got all kinds of different divisions trying to ensure the safe bet. So what is that? Those are summer blockbuster, tentpole, mediocre films, right? And we see it all the time in games. It's the same thing. And what's happening? A lot of times they go, you are going to be in charge of the vision of this, branded license, right? And someone goes like, I'm going to be? Yeah. And now all of this upper echelon is going to tell you how to make it great, And so we wind up with a lot of things that they don't have the heart that of someone who would have been like, at different times I find myself like, look, I get none of you believe in it, right? But it's going to work. But we got to at least get to here before these things can prove it. And the reason you don't believe it is because you never played it before, and I can get that. So you got to, no matter what, if it's a big brand you're working with, the bigger the budget it is. I mean, it's easier for us today because we're indie. Right. We're not going to lose anyone else's money. We'll go broke. But so you're responsible for your own decisions. And at the same time, that actually made me, I think, better in terms of sticking less to your own vision specifically and listening more. And in the beginning, you're borrowing money, you're really out on a limb, you got to be right, and you're being told, look, you got to kill it this time. You got to kill this E3, and you're like, oh God, it's not running, or whatever it is. And so a lot of things happen. We've seen it blow back on a lot of designers. I totally understand the spots they were in. They said the wrong thing, don't follow through. They get crucified. It happens. But you got to have, whether it's a team, Pixar had a great saying, Ed Catmull, who I think was a cultural genius in terms of keeping cultures together and figuring out how to make, in his word, art a team sport. And that's really games too, is that it's less about an individual director, but there has to be a vision. And if that vision is retained by a committee, it's got to be a really good, small committee. And a few weak eggs there, like what happens all the time, you get an acquisition, just to ramble a bit on it, right? You get an acquisition, and then the buying company, depending on how wise they are or not, sends in a mediocre lackey to now be in charge of that whole company that they just bought. And now that guy, he's terrified to make a decision, so now he wants a consensus. So you get the camel out of the committee design, right? Even though the people there be like, look, man, I'm telling you what to do. Okay, I got these awards on the wall. You don't, but you're going to listen to them now because you don't know the decision to make, and that's the game we're going to deliver. Thank you very much for wasting 3-4 years of my life.
There are a lot of people out there that are.
You don't sound bitter at all.
No. And I'm the guy who always had creative freedom, which is kind of like, well, that can bite you in the butt too.
You end up in a position where there are a lot of people in those decision-making roles that are really just afraid to lose their job.
Yeah, it's an expensive world. Yeah, I can understand.
I feel like, totally. I get it. But
there's a fear. The more money there is, the more fear there is around a project. The project comes to the show and gets promoted as though, look at how excited we are. But half of it is, look how terrified we are. You better get the right reception. We'll fund the stuff, and there's all different spectrums of how big it gets. But basically, the more money's involved, then the more fear is going to, I think, we'd agree, the more fear orbits around the project, which means the core group, like you talk about 4 teams coming together, right? What a cultural, orgy that was, right? Yeah. It's like, and you can imagine how tense that can be because there's lots of different fears that will emerge, egos that will emerge. But when you can synergize a vision and you have a few people who are like, look, we no matter what the bank or what this, we have to agree that we're going to make the decisions based on what's best for the player, right, at the end of the day. And we're going to hear all these voices, but we're going to have to sift through and really try and figure out what's reactionary, what's overreactionary, what's on, what should we listen to, where do we need to be smarter, how close are we to it, and how little do we actually know about our own game now, because to their points, you're way too close. Which is, these are all common. How do you work on some 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, year after year?
Especially if it comes together right at the end.
And have clarity, and it doesn't work most of the project, is most of the cases.
But it seems like Hangar